Get out." The man in the tailored suit didn't whisper it. He didn't ask nicely. He said it like he owned the room. Juliana froze beside the hospital bed, her paperback still open in her hands. The stranger in the bed, Peter, lay motionless. Machines hummed. Lines ran into his arm. His chest rose and fell, like it had forgotten how to fight. The man stepped closer and pointed at Juliana like she was a stain on the sheets. "You've been coming here every day," he said, reading to him, touching him, acting like you belong. Juliana's throat tightened. "I'm a volunteer. The nurses." "I don't care what the nurses told you," he snapped. His blue eyes were sharp and angry, like he'd been awake for days. "You're not family. You're not staff. You're not his friend." Juliana swallowed. "Someone should be." That made his jaw clench harder. Then he did it, the humiliating part. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and slid a $100 bill across the bedside table like a tip. "Here," he said, "for your time. Now leave." Juliana stared at the money. Her face went hot. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she closed the book slowly and looked him straight in the eye. "You're paying me," she said, voice steady, "because you feel guilty." The man stiffened. Juliana leaned in closer, lowering her voice so it sounded dangerous. "And if you really are his business partner," she said, "why did your name show up on the document hidden under his mattress?" Patrick's expression flickered. Just for half a second. But it was enough. He knew exactly what she was talking about. Juliana watched his face harden as if he'd made a decision. Then he said, cold and quiet, "What did you see?" Patrick Yates did not move. But something in the room changed. The sharp anger on his face faded. In its place came something colder, something calculating. "What document?" he asked slowly. Juliana didn't answer right away. She simply studied him. In the weeks she had been coming to this room, she had learned something important about people. Silence made them reveal more than words ever could. Patrick held her gaze. He was tall, confident, expensively dressed, the kind of man who probably controlled boardrooms and billion-dollar contracts with a single sentence. But right now, there was tension in his shoulders, and that meant he was afraid of something. Juliana closed the paperback book and placed it on the chair. "I wasn't snooping," she said, "before you accuse me." Patrick crossed his arms. "I haven't accused you of anything. Yet." She stepped toward the bed. Peter lay between them, still and silent. His head was wrapped in gauze. The bruises along his jaw had faded to yellow. 3 weeks ago, a drunk driver had run a red light and crushed his car. That was the official story. But something about it had never felt right. Juliana reached under the thin hospital mattress. Patrick leaned forward instantly. "Stop!" His voice was sharper now. Juliana paused. Then slowly, she pulled out a small black notebook. Patrick's face went pale. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition. "You already saw it," he said quietly. Juliana nodded once. "I didn't understand most of it," she admitted. "Numbers, notes, dates, quote." Patrick took a step closer to the bed. "What else?" Quote, "Names." That single word changed everything. Patrick's jaw tightened. "What names?" Juliana hesitated. Her instincts were screaming at her. In the bookstore where she worked, people often underestimated her. They assumed the quiet girl behind the counter was simple. But Juliana had always been good at reading people, and Patrick Yates was hiding something. "I'm not stupid," she said. Patrick exhaled slowly through his nose. "I never said you were. But you tried to pay me to leave." Patrick looked down at the $100 bill still sitting on the table. Then he pushed it away like it disgusted him. "That was a mistake." "Was it?" Quote, "Yes." Juliana held up the notebook, then explained this. Patrick hesitated. He looked at Peter, then at the notebook, then back at Juliana. Finally, he spoke. "That notebook shouldn't be here." Peter hid it. Patrick's head snapped up. "You saw him do it?" Quote, "No." Juliana's voice softened. "But I think he knew something was going to happen." Patrick stared at her. The room went quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Juliana flipped open the notebook. Inside were messy handwritten notes, numbers, contract codes, short sentences scribbled quickly like someone writing under pressure. She turned the pages slowly. "I only recognized one name," she said. Patrick's eyes narrowed. "Which one?" Juliana looked up. "Yours." Patrick's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed was heavy. "Then you didn't read the next page," he said. Juliana blinked. "What?" Patrick reached forward slowly. "May I?" She hesitated, then handed him the notebook. Patrick flipped through it carefully until he reached a page near the back. He turned it around and showed her. One line had been circled 3 times. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. Juliana read the words. Her stomach dropped. "Brake system sabotage. Confirm before board meeting." She looked up slowly. Patrick's voice was barely above a whisper. Peter wasn't hit by a drunk driver. Juliana felt the air leave her lungs. "What are you saying?" Quote. Patrick closed the notebook. "I'm saying," he said quietly, "someone tried to kill him." The words hung in the air like smoke. Juliana looked at Peter. His chest rose slowly. Machines beeped steadily. The man lying in that hospital bed wasn't just a patient. He was the co-founder of a company worth hundreds of millions. And according to his own notes, someone had sabotaged his car. Juliana turned back to Patrick. "Who?" Patrick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the door and quietly closed it. When he turned back around, his voice was lower. "Careful. Peter and I built a company together," he said. "Sustainable construction materials. 5 years ago, we were 2 engineers with a crazy idea." "I know," Juliana said. "You told me." Patrick nodded. "But 2 weeks before the accident, we landed the biggest contract in the company's history. The West Coast project." "Yes." Juliana frowned. "That doesn't sound like a motive for murder." Patrick gave a humorless laugh. "You'd be surprised what billion-dollar contracts do to people." Quote. Juliana felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You think someone inside the company did this?" Patrick met her eyes. "I know someone did." Juliana took a step back. "Then why hasn't the police?" "Because the evidence disappeared." Her heart skipped. "What?" Patrick leaned against the wall, rubbing his face. The crash investigation report was clean. No mechanical failure. No sabotage. But Peter wrote. Exactly. Juliana looked at the notebook again, then at Patrick, then back at Peter. "If he knew something was wrong," she said slowly, "why didn't he tell you?" Patrick's expression darkened. "That," he said quietly, "is the question that's been keeping me awake for 3 weeks." Juliana studied him. "You don't think he suspected you, do you?" Patrick froze. The silence stretched. Then he said softly, "That's exactly what the board thinks." Juliana's eyes widened. "What?" Patrick laughed again, bitter this time. "When Peter's accident happened, the company lawyers discovered something interesting." "What?" Patrick met her gaze. "The final contract revisions were signed under my authority." Juliana felt the room tilt slightly. "You're saying they think you sabotaged the car?" "They don't need to prove it." Patrick's voice was flat. "They just need enough doubt to push me out as CEO." Juliana looked down at Peter again, the man who might hold the truth, the only witness, still unconscious. "Then when he wakes up," she said slowly. Patrick nodded. "Everything changes." Juliana closed the notebook. "And if he doesn't?" Patrick didn't answer. But the look in his eyes said everything. If Peter never woke up, Patrick Yates would lose the company he built. And the real person behind the accident would walk away free. Juliana looked down at the man she had been reading to every afternoon. A stranger. A patient. Now the center of a billion-dollar war. Then she said something Patrick did not expect. "Then we wake him up." Patrick blinked. "What?" Juliana picked up her book again. Her voice was calm, determined. "You said Peter is brilliant." "He is." Quote. "And you said he believes in changing the world." Patrick nodded slowly. "Yes." Juliana sat back in the chair beside the bed. Then she opened the book. "Good," she said, "because I think he's been listening to us this whole time." Patrick stared at her. Juliana looked at Peter, then began reading again. But this time, it wasn't just a story. It was a message. And somewhere inside that silent mind, Peter Norton might already be trying to fight his way back. Juliana's voice filled the hospital room again, clear, steady, controlled. But the story she was reading no longer mattered. Not to her, not to Patrick. Every word was now something else. A signal, a rope thrown into darkness. "Chapter 5, she said softly, eyes on the page. Across the bed, Patrick watched Peter like a man studying a storm on the horizon, waiting, praying, fearing. Juliana continued reading. Her voice moved through the room like a quiet current. Patrick leaned closer to Peter. "You hear that, buddy?" he murmured. "Your favorite reader's back." No movement, just the steady rhythm of the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Juliana read for another 10 minutes before Patrick spoke again. "You really believe he can hear you?" Juliana didn't stop reading. "Yes." Patrick studied her. "You sound very sure." Juliana finished the paragraph, then closed the book for a moment. "I've seen it before." Patrick frowned. "What do you mean?" She leaned back in the chair. 2 months ago, I was reading to a woman in room 312. She was in a coma for 18 days. Patrick waited. "One day I was reading a chapter where the detective catches the killer," Juliana continued. "And suddenly her heart rate spiked." Patrick blinked. "What?" The doctor said sometimes the brain reacts to familiar voices. Patrick looked at Peter again. "Then we keep talking," he said quietly. Juliana nodded. But her eyes drifted to the notebook on the table. The one that might prove someone tried to kill the man lying between them. Patrick followed her gaze. "We can't show that to anyone yet," he said. "Why not?" "Because if someone inside the company did sabotage the brakes..." He paused. "Then they'll know Peter suspected them." Juliana slowly understood. "And they'll destroy whatever evidence is left." Quote, "Exactly." Silence settled again. Juliana reopened the book. "Then we keep reading." Patrick almost smiled, but the moment didn't last. Because his phone started vibrating. He glanced at the screen. His expression hardened instantly, Juliana noticed. "Bad news?" Patrick stood up. "That's the board." He walked toward the window and answered, "Yes." Juliana tried not to listen, but the room was small, and Patrick wasn't exactly whispering. "What do you mean, emergency meeting?" Pause. "No, I told you I'm at the hospital." Another pause. Patrick's voice became colder. "You want me there in an hour?" Juliana turned a page slowly. Patrick rubbed his forehead. "Yes, I understand the situation." Another pause. Then Patrick's eyes darkened. "Who said that?" Juliana glanced up. Patrick's posture had gone rigid. "No," he said sharply. "That's not true." The voice on the other end must have continued, because Patrick suddenly laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. More talking. Then Patrick ended the call. He stood there for a long moment staring at the phone. Juliana closed the book again. "What happened?" Patrick turned around slowly. "The board thinks I tried to kill Peter." Juliana's stomach dropped. "What?" "They're calling an emergency vote tonight." "For what?" Patrick's voice was calm now, too calm. "To remove me as CEO." Juliana stood up. "They can't do that." Patrick gave a tired smile. "They absolutely can. But there's no proof." "They don't need proof." He walked back to the bed and looked down at Peter. "They just need fear." Juliana felt anger spark inside her chest. "This is insane." Patrick nodded. "Yes." Then he looked at the notebook. "And whoever sabotaged the car probably arranged this meeting." Juliana understood immediately. "They want you out before Peter wakes up." "Exactly." Patrick checked his watch. "I have 40 minutes. Juliana frowned. "For what?" Quote, "To drive across the city and defend myself in front of 12 people who have already decided I'm guilty." The bitterness in his voice was impossible to miss. Juliana looked at Peter again, then at Patrick. "You're not going." Patrick blinked. What? You heard me! Juliana crossed her arms. You're not leaving this room. Patrick stared at her. You don't understand how corporate boards work. And you don't understand how desperate people act when they're about to lose everything. Patrick frowned. What are you saying? Juliana stepped closer. I'm saying whoever tried to kill Peter will win if you walk into that meeting alone. Patrick hesitated. The logic was brutal. And correct. Juliana tapped the notebook. This is proof Peter knew something. Yes. And the board doesn't know it exists. No. Juliana looked at the unconscious man on the bed. So the only person who can clear your name, Patrick finished the sentence quietly, is him. Juliana nodded. Patrick ran both hands through his hair. This is insane. Juliana smiled slightly. Probably. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Patrick stared at Peter again, his best friend, his partner, the only witness. Wake up, Pete, he whispered. But the machines stayed steady. No movement, no response. Juliana watched Patrick carefully. You built a company with him, she said. Yes. You trust him. With my life. Juliana picked up the book again. Then trust him now. Patrick frowned. What do you mean? Juliana opened the book to the next page. Trust that he's still fighting. Patrick leaned against the wall again. You're very calm for someone who just got dragged into a corporate murder conspiracy. Juliana smiled faintly. I work at a bookstore. That doesn't explain anything. It explains everything. Patrick blinked. How? Juliana pointed to the book. Stories. Patrick waited. In stories, she continued, the hero always looks like they've lost right before the truth comes out. Patrick crossed his arms. You think we're in a story? Juliana shrugged. I think people underestimate quiet characters. Patrick almost laughed. Then, the monitor beep changed. Both of them froze. Beep, 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 faster. Juliana turned slowly toward the bed. Patrick leaned forward. Did you see that? Peter's fingers twitched. Juliana's heart jumped. There. Patrick grabbed the edge of the mattress. Peter? Another twitch. The monitor beeped faster again. Juliana dropped the book. Peter? Patrick leaned closer. Buddy, if you can hear me. The eyelids trembled, just slightly, but unmistakably. Juliana pressed the nurse call button. Come on, Patrick whispered. Come on, Pete. The door burst open as nurses rushed in. What happened? He moved, Juliana said breathlessly. He responded. The nurse checked the monitor. Vitals are rising. Another nurse shined a light in Peter's eyes. Peter? Patrick stepped back. His heart was pounding. Juliana grabbed his arm. Look. Peter's eyelids moved again. Slow, heavy, but trying. Patrick felt tears burn his eyes. Come on. The doctor rushed into the room. What's going on? Patient showing neurological response, the nurse said. The doctor leaned over the bed. Peter, if you can hear me. Juliana held her breath. Patrick felt the world narrow. And then Peter's lips moved, barely, but enough. Patrick leaned closer. What? Peter whispered something, so quiet it almost didn't exist. Patrick lowered his ear to Peter's mouth. What did you say? Peter forced the words out. Not, Patrick. Juliana's eyes widened. Patrick froze. Peter's voice was weak, broken, but clear. Board member. Then his eyes opened, just a crack, and the first thing he said changed everything. Don't trust Carter. The doctor pulled Patrick back. Give him space. But Patrick's mind was already racing. One name, one man. One of the 12 people sitting in that emergency meeting right now. Carter Whitmore, the chairman of the board. Juliana looked at Patrick slowly. What just happened? Patrick's voice was barely a whisper. The man accusing me of sabotage. He swallowed hard. Is the one Peter just warned us about. Juliana felt a chill run down her spine. Because if Peter was right, the real enemy wasn't outside the company. He was sitting at the very top. And right now, He thought Patrick Yates was walking into a trap. The hospital room fell quiet again after the doctors finished their checks. Peter had slipped back into sleep. Not the deep, unreachable coma he had been trapped in for weeks. This was different. Lighter. Fragile. The doctor stood near the door, speaking calmly. "He's responding well," she said. "Moments of awareness like that are a very good sign." Patrick nodded, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Carter Whitmore, chairman of the board. The man who had just called an emergency meeting to remove him. The man Peter had warned about with his first breath. Juliana watched Patrick carefully. "You're thinking about the meeting." Patrick looked at his watch. 20 minutes left. "They're waiting for me." Juliana folded her arms. "And?" Patrick gave a humorless smile. "And the chairman of the board might be the person who tried to kill my best friend." Juliana nodded slowly. "So you still plan to walk into a room full of his allies?" Patrick hesitated, because that was exactly what he had been planning to do, until 5 minutes ago. He looked at Peter, then at the notebook, then back at Juliana. "I can't accuse Carter without proof." Juliana tapped the notebook. "Maybe you already have some." Patrick shook his head. "That note is suspicion, not evidence." Juliana frowned. "So we need evidence." Patrick studied her. "You say that like it's easy." Juliana picked up the notebook again. "Maybe it is." Patrick raised an eyebrow. "How?" Juliana flipped through the pages slowly. Peter's handwriting covered most of them. Dates, meetings, contract numbers. But one page looked different, messy, almost frantic. Juliana pointed. "What's this code?" Patrick leaned closer. "That's not a code." "What is it?" Quote. Patrick's eyes widened slightly. "It's a shipment ID." Juliana blinked. "For what?" Patrick took the notebook. "This shipment was supposed to arrive 2 days before Peter's accident." "What shipment?" Quote. Patrick turned the page toward her. "Prototype brake components." Juliana frowned. "Brake components?" Patrick nodded. "For our company trucks." Juliana's stomach tightened. "Wait." Patrick finished the thought. "The same brake system that failed in Peter's car." Silence fell between them. Juliana looked back at the notebook. "So the brakes that failed weren't random." Patrick's voice was quiet. "No. They were part of a company shipment." "Yes." Juliana felt something click in her mind. "And Carter oversees supply contracts." Patrick stared at her. "You're very quick." Juliana shrugged slightly. "Bookstore girl." "Remember." Patrick almost smiled, but the tension in the room remained. "If Carter tampered with that shipment," Patrick said slowly, "he could sabotage Peter without anyone tracing it back to him." Juliana nodded. "And then blame you." Patrick leaned against the wall again. "That would remove both founders." Juliana's eyes widened. "Both?" Patrick nodded. "If I'm forced out as CEO tonight." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Juliana finished it for him. "Carter controls the company." Patrick gave a slow nod. The pieces were fitting together now, too perfectly. Juliana looked down at Peter. "So Peter discovered this before the board meeting." Patrick nodded again. He must have realized something was wrong with the shipment. And someone found out he knew. Patrick exhaled slowly and cut his brakes. Juliana felt a cold anger settle in her chest. For weeks she had been sitting beside this hospital bed reading stories to a stranger. Now she realized something terrifying. Peter had almost died because he tried to stop someone powerful. Patrick checked his watch again. 15 minutes. Juliana noticed. "You're still going." Patrick nodded. "Yes." "Even though Carter is behind this?" Quote. "Yes." Juliana frowned. "Why?" Patrick met her eyes. "Because if I don't show up, the board removes me automatically." Juliana thought for a moment. Then she said something that made Patrick pause. "What if you don't need the board to believe you?" Patrick frowned. "What?" Quote. Juliana tapped the notebook. "You said this shipment has an ID." "Yes." "Then it must have records." Patrick's eyes sharpened. "Yes." Juliana smiled slightly. "And records leave trails." Patrick stared at her. Then, suddenly, he understood. "Shipping logs." Juliana nodded. Exactly. Patrick grabbed his phone instantly. Warehouse database. He began typing quickly. Juliana watched him. What are you looking for? The shipment, Peter wrote down. Patrick's fingers moved fast across the screen. Then suddenly, he stopped. His expression changed. What? Patrick turned the phone toward her. The screen showed a shipping record. Shipment ID 7X44821. Destination, Fleet Testing Facility. Juliana leaned closer. Is that the one? Patrick nodded slowly. Yes. Juliana pointed at another line. What's that? Patrick's face darkened. Authorization code. Juliana read it. Approved by C. Whitmore. Silence filled the room again. Patrick whispered the words slowly. Carter authorized the brake shipment. Juliana exhaled. So the brakes that failed in Peter's car, Patrick finished, came from a shipment Carter personally approved. Juliana folded her arms. That seems like very useful information. Patrick's mind was already racing. But it's still circumstantial. Juliana tilted her head. Then maybe we need something less circumstantial. Patrick looked at her. You have an idea. Juliana nodded. Yes. Patrick waited. Juliana pointed at the hospital door. The board meeting. Patrick blinked. What about it? Quote. Juliana smiled slightly. If Carter thinks you're walking in there alone. Patrick's eyes widened. Then he'll feel safe. Juliana nodded again. Exactly. Patrick understood now. You want him to talk. Yes. Patrick thought about the chairman. Carter Whitmore was powerful, arrogant, the kind of man who believed he was always the smartest person in the room. Juliana's voice was calm. People like that make mistakes when they think they've already won. Patrick slowly smiled. For someone who works in a bookstore. Juliana raised an eyebrow. Yes, quote, you're dangerously good at strategy. Juliana picked up her book again. I read a lot of mystery novels. Patrick checked his watch again. 10 minutes. Juliana looked at him. You should go. Patrick hesitated. And leave you here? Juliana looked at Peter. I'm not leaving him. Patrick studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay. He turned toward the door, but before he left, he stopped. Juliana. She looked up. Yes? Patrick's voice was softer now. If this works. Yes? I might owe you my company. Juliana smiled. I'm more interested in justice. Patrick nodded once. Then he walked out the door. Juliana sat back down beside Peter. The room felt quiet again. She opened the book. All right, Peter, she said softly. Your partner just walked into a very dangerous room. She turned the page. So I think it's time you wake up again. And somewhere across the city, Patrick Yates stepped into a boardroom where the man who tried to destroy him was already waiting. The boardroom was silent when Patrick Yates walked in. 12 people sat around the long glass table. Expensive suits, cold faces. Some avoided eye contact. Others watched him like a man already finished. At the head of the table sat Carter Whitmore, chairman of the board. Silver hair, perfect posture, calm smile. The kind of smile powerful men used when they believed they had already won. Patrick, Carter said warmly, nice of you to join us. Patrick didn't respond. He walked slowly to the empty chair near the center of the table. No one offered a handshake. No one welcomed him. That told him everything. They had already decided. Carter folded his hands. Shall we begin? Patrick leaned back in the chair. Go ahead. Carter nodded to the company lawyer sitting beside him. Lawyer cleared his throat. As everyone here knows, we are meeting today to discuss the leadership stability of the company following Peter Norton's accident. Patrick kept his face neutral. Carter spoke next. Peter's unfortunate condition has left the company vulnerable. Several board members nodded. Carter continued smoothly. And recent discoveries about the brake components installed in Peter's vehicle raise serious questions. Patrick said nothing. Carter's eyes slid toward him. The components came from a shipment approved under your authority. There it was, the accusation, soft, polite, deadly. A woman on the board leaned forward. "Patrick, can you explain how experimental brake parts ended up installed in Peter's personal vehicle?" Patrick folded his hands calmly. "I can." The room went quiet. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Please do." Patrick looked around the table slowly. Then he spoke. The shipment in question was authorized by Carter Whitmore. The silence that followed was instant. Several heads turned. Carter didn't move. His expression remained perfectly calm. Then he chuckled. "That's not quite accurate." Patrick met his eyes. "The shipping log says otherwise." Carter leaned back. "Yes, I approved the shipment to our testing facility." He shrugged slightly. "But I certainly didn't install those parts in Peter's car." A few board members murmured. Patrick nodded slowly. "That's true." Carter's smile widened slightly. Patrick continued. "But the real question is—" He leaned forward. "Why did you rush this meeting today?" Carter's smile faded a fraction. "I beg your pardon?" Patrick's voice was quiet. "Peter woke up this afternoon." The room exploded. "What? He's conscious? Is he stable?" Carter's face froze. Just for a moment. Patrick watched that moment carefully. "Yes," Patrick said calmly. "He spoke." Every board member leaned forward. "What did he say?" Patrick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the silence stretch. Then he looked directly at Carter. "He warned me not to trust you." The room went dead quiet. Carter laughed, a little too quickly. "That's ridiculous." Patrick tilted his head. "Is it?" Quote. Carter's eyes hardened. "You're accusing me of attempted murder?" Patrick shrugged slightly. "I'm accusing you of something much worse." Carter folded his hands again. "Which is?" Quote. Patrick stood slowly, sabotaging the company's brake shipment. Several board members exchanged uneasy looks. Carter remained calm. "You have no proof." Patrick nodded. "You're right." Carter smiled again. The confidence returned instantly. "Then this conversation is pointless." Patrick reached into his pocket. "Actually," he placed his phone on the table. "I think it's just getting interesting." He pressed play. The room filled with Carter Whitmore's voice. Recorded, clear. Everyone turned toward the phone. Carter's smile vanished. "How?" The recording continued. Carter's voice was unmistakable. Peter was getting suspicious. The brake shipment was the cleanest solution. The board members stared at Carter in disbelief. "Once Patrick takes the blame, the board removes him, and I take control of the company." Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Patrick leaned back in his chair. "You were saying something about proof?" Carter's face had turned white. "That recording is illegal." Patrick shrugged. "It's accurate." The room erupted into chaos, board members shouting, lawyers talking over each other. One of the investors slammed his hand on the table. "Carter, tell me that's not your voice." Carter didn't answer, because there was no answer left. Patrick stood calmly. "You sabotaged the shipment." Carter's voice cracked. "You can't prove that." Patrick pointed at the screen. "The shipment log proves you authorized it." Then he leaned closer. "And Peter woke up." Carter's eyes widened. Patrick smiled slightly. "So now we have a witness." The room fell silent again. Carter looked around the table, but the support he expected was gone. No one defended him. No one looked at him anymore. Patrick spoke quietly. "You tried to kill my best friend." Carter whispered, "You have no idea what that contract was worth." Patrick nodded slowly. "I do." He leaned forward. "And I'd rather lose the company than become the kind of man you are." One of the board members stood. "I'm calling security." Another spoke. "And the police." Carter didn't resist. He just sat there. The most powerful man in the room 5 minutes ago, now finished. Patrick picked up his phone. Then he said one final sentence, the one that sealed Carter's fate. "You made one mistake." Carter looked up slowly. Patrick's voice was calm. "You thought Peter was the smartest person in this company." He paused. "But you forgot about the quiet girl sitting beside his hospital bed." Across the city. Juliana Norton turned another page of her book, and Peter Norton opened his eyes again. The hospital room was quiet again. Juliana's voice moved gently through the space as she read another chapter from the book. Outside the window, the afternoon light was beginning to fade, but inside the room, something had changed. Peter Norton was awake, not fully strong yet, not able to sit up without help, but awake, and very much aware. Juliana finished the page and closed the book softly. "You're getting better at this," Peter said weakly. Juliana smiled. "Listening?" Peter shook his head slightly, pretending I don't notice you skipping the boring parts. Juliana laughed. "You noticed that?" "Of course." His voice was still rough, but there was humor in it now. The door opened. Patrick walked in. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon. Tie loose, hair messy, eyes bright. Juliana stood up. "What happened?" Patrick looked at Peter, then at Juliana, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. "It's over." Peter frowned slightly. "What's over?" Patrick pulled the chair closer to the bed. "Carter Whitmore is being arrested." Peter stared at him. "What?" Patrick explained everything. The emergency board meeting, the accusations, the recording, the silence that followed when Carter realized the game was finished. Juliana watched Peter's expression slowly shift, from confusion to shock. Then, finally, relief. Peter exhaled. "I knew something was wrong with that shipment." Patrick nodded. "You wrote it down." Peter looked at Juliana. "The notebook." Juliana held it up. "Safe." Peter smiled weakly. "Good." Patrick leaned back in the chair. The board voted unanimously. "For what?" Peter asked. Patrick's voice was calm. "To remove Carter as chairman." Peter laughed quietly. That must have been satisfying. Patrick looked at Juliana. "You have no idea." Juliana shook her head. "Don't look at me." Patrick raised an eyebrow. "You're the reason I had the recording." Peter blinked. "Recording?" Patrick explained how Juliana had insisted they look deeper into the shipment records, how she realized Carter would feel safe if Patrick appeared alone, how that confidence made Carter careless. Peter looked at Juliana with new respect. "You did all that?" Juliana shrugged. "I read a lot of mysteries." Peter smiled. "Well, remind me never to underestimate a bookstore girl." Patrick leaned forward. "That seems to be a common mistake." Peter turned serious again. "The company?" Patrick nodded. "Safe." Peter closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were clearer, stronger. "You protected it." Patrick shook his head. "We protected it." Peter looked at Juliana again. "Especially her." Juliana shifted awkwardly. "I just read books." Peter chuckled. "You did more than that." He looked between the two of them. Then something in his expression softened. "I've been awake long enough to notice something else." Patrick frowned. "What?" Peter smirked slightly. "You two look at each other a lot." Juliana turned red immediately. Patrick cleared his throat. "That's not." Peter raised a weak hand. "Relax." He looked at Juliana. "You saved my life." Juliana shook her head. "The doctors did that." Peter smiled. "You gave me a reason to come back." The room grew quiet. Patrick looked down for a moment. Then he stood up. "I should call the board again." Juliana tilted her head. "Why?" Patrick looked at Peter. "Because the company has its CEO back." Peter laughed weakly. "Oh, no." Patrick blinked. "What?" Peter pointed at him. "You're not escaping that easily." Patrick frowned. "What are you talking about?" Peter grinned. "You ran the company for 3 weeks alone." Patrick shrugged. "I had no choice." Peter nodded. "Exactly." Then he said something that surprised both of them. "You should keep running it." Patrick stared at him. "What?" Peter continued. "You're better at the business side anyway." Quote. Patrick shook his head. "We built this together." "And we'll keep building it together," Peter said. "But you're the CEO." Patrick looked stunned. Juliana smiled quietly. Peter leaned back into the pillow. "There's only one condition." Patrick sighed. "What?" Peter pointed at Juliana. Listen to her more often. Juliana laughed. That's good advice. Patrick looked at her, then at Peter. Then he smiled. Deal. The following months passed quickly. Peter recovered faster than anyone expected. Physical therapy, board meetings, long conversations about rebuilding trust inside the company. Carter Whitmore was formally charged. The investigation revealed everything. The brake shipment, the sabotage, the plan to remove both founders. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. The company survived. And something else began growing quietly at the same time. Something much simpler. Patrick started staying at the hospital, even after Peter no longer needed him there. Juliana noticed. One evening she closed her book and looked at him. You don't have to keep visiting, quote. Patrick smiled. Oh, I know. Peter's already asleep. I know. Juliana crossed her arms. Then why are you still here? Patrick thought for a moment. Then he answered honestly, because you are. Juliana looked down at the book in her hands. You're a CEO. Patrick nodded, yes. You run a company worth hundreds of millions. Yes. Juliana tilted her head. And you still show up every afternoon just to listen to someone read? Patrick smiled softly. Power isn't always about money. Juliana raised an eyebrow. Oh? Patrick leaned closer. It's about knowing who matters. Juliana felt her heart beat a little faster. And who matters? She asked. Patrick answered without hesitation. The person everyone else overlooked. Juliana looked at him, really looked. Then she smiled, because in that moment, the power dynamic that had started this entire story had completely flipped. The billionaire who once tried to pay her to leave now waited every afternoon just to hear her voice, and somewhere in the quiet rhythm of those pages turning, something stronger than revenge had been built. Trust, partnership, and a future neither of them had expected. Peter said it best the day he left the hospital. He looked at Patrick, then at Juliana, then said quietly, "The biggest mistake powerful people make," he paused, "is forgetting that the quiet ones are the ones who see everything." Patrick smiled. Juliana closed her book. And the story that began with suspicion, betrayal, and a hospital bed ended with justice.